Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the webinar on what to do if your mind goes blank. People ask me quite often, what happens when I'm mid-presentation and the next point I was going to say, it's just gone. People such as myself, as we get older, our memories and our ability to stay on track become less and less. We call them seniors moments sometimes. Then there's the brain drain and the complete stage fright where it just drains. So I'm going to give you 6 strategies that you can use that will, in my view, help you and give you more confidence to move forward. The alternative, of course, is to read word for word from your notes. And that's not really public speaking. That doesn't engage the audience. That doesn't give you the ability to respond and read the audience by making good eye contact because you're focused on a set of notes. So here's some strategies to help you the next time you worry about your mind going blank, or maybe you lose track of where you want it to be in your presentation. As with most webinars, ask questions as we go. Take notes. Feel free to ask me questions after the webinar via email. And of course, apply this information to yourself. So previously, when you've presented, could have you used one of these strategies? If you have a presentation coming up, can you use 1 or 2 of these strategies to give you confidence and to recover should you perceive that your mind's going blank? So the 6 strategies, the first one is go back to core message, go back to basics. I mean, people are there for you to talk about a particular subject you're an expert in, you know a lot about it. You've probably got some intricacies, you're going into some data and you just have a momentary lapse. Just go back to your core message, that big message. Second one is ask the audience to do something. Third one is around taking care of yourself through breathing, staying calm, being comfortable with silence. Using notes and mind maps. This is not going back to a script, but to some notes. Move on to your next point or your next idea. And most importantly, with number 6, don't tell them that you've lost your way. Don't tell them that you've had a brain freeze. Just don't let them know. They will not know. So let's go through these one by one. And I'll move on fairly quickly today. Go back to your core message. So when we prepare a presentation, we kind of start with the purpose for having this presentation. And the purpose is generally one big message and something that's really relevant to the people in the room. When you put those 2 questions together, what's my one big message and why does it matter to the people in the room? That's your core message. And good speakers will keep reiterating that. They'll use different words, but they'll keep emphasizing. So what I'm really saying here is, and they'll go back to the big message. So when your mind goes blank and you'll lose track of what you're going to say next, you can always default and go back to basics, go back to your core message. That will generally buy you time. And the thought you're going to say, the next point, you'll be able to recover and move on to that. And that is my fallback position always. Just go back and reiterate because you're clear on your core message. You're clear on what people to walk away with. So there's no harm in emphasizing that and reiterating that multiple times during your talk. Mind goes blank was going to say something very clever, very fancy to illustrate an aspect, but I'm just going to go back to my core message for the moment. First strategy. Second strategy, ask the audience to do something, to do an activity or an exercise. And I use this quite often. It's not only a good way for you to recover, but you should be doing this anyhow. It's a way to include your audience. It helps those kinesthetic learners. It helps embed the learning, makes it more interactive, makes it more engaging. So I'm going to stop for a moment now. Can you turn to the person next to you? What's one thing you've learned so far? What's the biggest issue you think facing new lawyers? What's the biggest issue you think at the moment facing accountants and financial planners? I'll give you 2 minutes to have a quick chat. So that's about 60 seconds each. Then you go quiet and you use that time to go to your script or go to your notes and recover. Use that time to go and get a drink of water. Use that time to deep breathe, to breathe deeply. So when you ask the audience to do an exercise or an activity, turn to the person next to you. That gives you that time out that you need to recover if your mind goes blank. Third one, there's several parts of this. The first one, stay calm. Emotional self-regulation is one of the most powerful things in leadership, in interpersonal communication. You know when your anxiety levels are going up. You know when you're feeling stressed. And those people with great emotional intelligence stay calm, not only when speaking, but when other people press their buttons. So in terms of conflict and negotiation and dealing with difficult people, this ability to stay calm under pressure, under fire, is just a wonderful trait. Now, I don't suggest you close your eyes and go into a yoga position, but when you realize that you've got nothing, you're not sure what you're going to say next, staying calm really helps. And there's a couple of things that help us to do this. So the first one, of course, is with breathing and deep breathing. One of the resting positions is when you put your, let's assume this gentleman is standing, when you put your hands around your midriff. So in actual fact, they're parallel to the ground. And it's where your belly button is, roughly, plus or minus a few inches. A mistake of stance is people put their hands down across their crotch, and that's called the fig leaf, and that's passive shy. So when I put my hands here, I can feel my belly button going in and out, which means I'm breathing deeply. This is my diaphragm. When you lose your train of thought, don't be afraid to do deep breathing, as opposed to move into the panic mode and then all the breathing is up around the top and our shoulders go up and down as we go, oh dear, what am I going to do now? And of course, poor oxygen exchange. Our brain's already under pressure and we apply more pressure by reducing the oxygenation, the oxygen exchange of our blood. So deep breathing is not just a wives' tale or just a saying, look, just deep breathe, just breathe deeply, you'll get through it. It is actually good physiological and good public speaking sense to breathe deeply. When you breathe in, you're inflating the diaphragm and the belly button pops out. As you exhale, the diaphragm deflates like a balloon and your hand should move in as your belly button moves in. That is deep breathing. You can do that before you go on stage to control nerves, and you can use that on stage if you get a little bit nervous, if a panic attack comes, if your mind goes blank. So breathing sounds like good advice, is good advice. Be comfortable with silence. So this is the third of the triad. So stay calm, deep breathe, and be comfortable with silence. So when your mind goes blank, if we put it on a scale of 1 to 10, put on a scale of 1 to 10, and the length of your pause or the length of your silence, with 10 being very high and 1 being, well, in fact, I'm not going to pause at all. I'm going to keep on speaking rapidly. When you pause for a long time, so your mind goes blank and you remain to be silent and you decide to be silent, you decide not to say anything, because in actual fact you're scrambling. You're scrambling to find, what am I going to say next? It appears quite uncomfortable for you. You might give it a 7 or an 8 out of 10. You might feel, well, if I don't say something soon, clearly people are going to know that I don't know what I'm going to say. The reality is that the audience only sees half of that. So you pause for a really, really long, uncomfortable time. For you, the audience sees 50%. So learning to be comfortable with silence is a really powerful skill for public speaking. It's also great for when your mind goes blank. So one of the things that I do when I'm presenting is I make sure that I model, that I show to people that I'm okay with the pause. I'm okay to just remain silent. This is a really good skill also because it helps you feel more credible if you're comfortable with silence. It's a great way of modeling to people that you're okay with the pause, you're okay with not speaking. And from a group dynamics perspective, this is really powerful and shows that you're more credible, you're more comfortable and more confident, even if you're feeling nervous. So being silent when your mind goes blank or on any other occasion actually models confidence and credibility. So let me share with you just a metaphor. If we cast our minds back to our first date, when we went out with someone for the first time, what happens is, we sit opposite each other and we need to talk, and the other person talks back and we just keep talking back. And because silence is absolutely terrible, so there must be no silence. So we chatter between the two people. That's first date. Silence is really uncomfortable on the first date. Then we go on to our second date, third date, fourth date, fifth date. We fall in love and we just peer at each other's eye to eye and we say nothing as we fall in love. As a speaker, as a presenter, as a trainer, a facilitator, if you're able to be comfortable and model, let the other people in the room know that you're okay with silence, you're bringing that audience together, you're bringing that audience to a group, you're helping that audience fall in love with you quicker metaphorically. So learn to be comfortable with silence. There's no need to fill the voids. It can create suspense. It can create amplification just by being silent. And of course, best of all, when your mind goes blank, you can pause. And that pause will often give you the time you need to recover. All right, I'm just going to pause for a moment. A few people have just joined on, so they missed the first few minutes. Are there any questions around being comfortable with silence? Any questions around what to do when your mind goes blank? I'll just go back also and I'll recap for those that started late. So I'll just go back. So the first thing is when you lose track of what you're saying, when your mind goes blank, go back to your core message. This is the one thing you want them to walk away with. So you were going to quote some statistics, you're going to move on, tell a story, but you've just gone blank. Just go back to the core message. Second one, ask the audience to do an exercise. So turn to the person next to you, have a chat for 60 seconds. What's one takeaway so far? What would you do if this situation occurred? And during that particular time, you have time to recover, to breathe, to have a drink of water, and gather your thoughts before you move on. And of course, the third one I've just covered is stay calm. And this is about emotional intelligence. When someone triggers you, difficult conversation, an aggressive customer. It's great emotional intelligence, great self-regulation if you can stay calm. Deep breathing, low diaphragmatic breathing. Don't go into that upper panting sort of breathing that just breeds nervousness, and be comfortable with silence. So the next one is go to your notes or your mind map. So remember I said the alternative to worrying about your mind going blank or having a brain drain while presenting, the alternative is to read from your script word by word, and that's not good public speaking. So while I would encourage you not to have a script and not to read from your notes, I am not telling you not to have notes. And I like to use a little mind map, and some people like to use bullet points. So what is it that you bring up to the front with you when you present as your stopgap, as your backup? So notes can be main point, subpoint, 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 second point, subpoint, 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 third point, subpoint, subpoint, conclusion, and your opening. And that might be a one-page mind map. Each of those major headings will be one word or one or two words, and each of those stories or stories or case studies or anecdotes will have a name as well. So that's your traditional notes. One pager, big font, big print. So when you lose track of your mind, you can just glance back at your notes and realize where you've been and what's coming next. One way of doing that, of course, is to ask the audience to do something, and then you go back to your notes. A mind map is more around what's your core message, point one, point two, point three, I'm going to do point four, and then maybe off that mind map you're going to have story one or case study two or anecdote two or data three or four. And once again, it's the words that trigger your conversation where you're going to move on to that matter. So I was in Brisbane running some workshops last week, and one of the things I spoke about is that nerves are a normal part of public speaking. Nerves will never go away. One of my stories I use, and my story's nickname is called Pukey, P-U-K-E-Y. And it's simply like this. Ringo Starr, one of the Beatles, the drummer for the Beatles, Ringo Starr, is also the voice of Thomas the Tank Engine. Ringo Starr's nickname is Pukey in the Sky with Diamonds. He's been playing in bands for 50 years, 20 years with the Beatles, and maybe you don't think he's the world's best drummer, but he's still a good drummer. Every time before he performs, he goes in the bathroom and throws up his stomach. He goes to the bathroom and pukes. So the Beatles have a song called Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. They've nicknamed him Pukey in the Sky with Diamonds. So if you get a little bit nervous, understand Ringo Starr gets nervous, I get nervous, most people get nervous. It doesn't stop him from being a great drummer. Now I can go on. What I'm saying is this one word, which I would have put on my mind map, Pukey, gives me 5-10 minutes worth of content to just let you know that nerves is part of peak performance. Nerves is part of public speaking, it's part of presentation skills, and I don't need to read that story because I know it. So that's mind mapping, or go to your notes. Any questions? Do I have a full script with me? That's a good question, Stephen. Yes, so I guess what I'd say is when you're preparing a speech, you probably want to at least put some words on paper. You probably want to have your pages with the words, and there'll be data, there'll be quotes, there'll be some complex stuff that you really can't remember. And then when I practice, I probably practice with that for a few times. Then I will transfer the essence of that speech to that mind map or that bullet point map, that bullet point note sheet. So generally the notes, and then when I practice for the next 2 or 3 times, I'll use my mind map or my notes as my cheat sheet because I should know my content well enough. There are occasions when just going to the mind map is not enough, and there's a level of complexity in there that you're just not sure about. You can then go to your full script if you need to. But this is the perfect time to ask the audience to do something. Right, before I go on, I'm just going to ask you to turn to the person next to you for 2 minutes. What's the next question we need to ask everyone? What's the next question? Flick through your notes, find where you are, transfer it onto your mind map, and then recover seamlessly without anyone knowing. Thanks for that question. All right. We've covered mind map. There's different ways of mind mapping. Move on to your next point or your next idea. So what happens for me sometimes is I'm presenting, because I present one-day workshops. And so this is 7 hours and I present them without notes. And what I do is I've ticked off that. I'll just change the color of my pen. I've ticked off that. I've ticked off that. I've ticked off that. And then I realize I've forgotten this one. I can weave that back in. And I've forgotten this one. Just move on. Move on to your next point. It doesn't really matter. You can always weave it back. One of the things I always like to do is acknowledge the traditional landowners. So in Perth, it's the Noongar Nation. In Perth particularly, it's the Whadjuk people. When I'm in Geelong, which I'll be going to soon, that's the Dja Dja Wurrung people. And when I go to Bendigo, it's the Wathaurong people. I was in Brisbane and I was doing my introduction, outlining the agenda for the day, talking about the rules, safety, handing out the workbook, how to handle questions, and realised I'd neglected to acknowledge the traditional land owners, and then just said, look, before I go on any further, I would just like to say that as a West Australian, I'm really pleased to be here, and I love to acknowledge the traditional landowners, respect the custodians and the elders past and present. Move on. Move on to your next point. All right, last one, point number 6. Don't tell the audience that you have lost your way. I guess all of you on the webinar as well, you have no idea what I'm going to say next. You don't know what my next point is going to be, the next story that I'm going to move on. And I may not know either, but if I don't tell you what I'm going to say next, and I don't tell you that I've lost my mind, rather lost my way, had a brain drain, had a seniors moment, you do not know. So just move on to core message, move on to your next point or whatever. Go back and get them to do something. So can you turn to the person next door, grab a drink of water as I'm about to do now, have a sip, go to your mind map, go to your notes, and then move on. The thing that I find is that 99% of the time in the workshops and the training that I do, when people stand up to speak before a group of people, they say, oh, sorry, I've just lost it. What was I going to say now? And within 4 or 5 seconds, they recover immediately. If they had not announced, if they had not spoken the fact that they'd lost their train of thought, that they'd had a bit of a brain drain, we would not have known. Remember that little chart I drew before. When you pause and you think it's really long time, say 7 out of 10, that was a long pause. I need to say something soon. or else clearly the audience is going to notice that I've forgotten what I was going to say. The audience only sees half of that, so 3 out of 10, which is a reasonable pause. So what I'm saying is when you're silent, you can remain silent for double the length of time than you feel comfortable with. This makes you feel really awkward. The audience doesn't notice that. Learn to be comfortable with silence. Remain calm, do your deep breathing, and if you don't let the audience know that you have lost your way, then use one of the recovery techniques. Ask them to do something. Glance at your mind map or your bullet points. You'll recover without them even being aware that you've lost your way. So to sum up, go back to your core message. Go back to your core message. Your core message is that one thing that you want them to talk about when they leave, that one thing you want them to remember, or that one thing for them to act upon. Get them to do something. Turn to the person next to you. Have a chat with the person behind you. Okay, I'll get you to stand up now and change seats. Find someone you haven't spoken to during the day. Stay calm. This is emotional intelligence. This is self-regulation. Breathe, deep breathing, diaphragmatic, and be comfortable with the silence. Refer to your notes or your mind map. Move on to your next point. Move on to your next idea. What I find is that the idea I missed comes back, and I remember I should have said that, and I'll weave that back in seamlessly. And because I do public speaking training, sometimes I then deconstruct what I've just done, and people say, we had no idea that you had forgotten what you wanted to say. We had no idea that was meant to be in the morning, and you've now spoken about it in the afternoon. We had no idea. Trust yourself in doing that. And don't tell them that you've lost your way. You'll have a remarkable response. Upcoming workshops. Winning presentation skills in Manage 'em Up. These are on my website. We're in Port Hedland, Karratha, going up to Darwin. Just come back from Brisbane. Bendigo and Mildura workshops. Share with your colleagues and friends. You know how to reach me. Quite happy to answer any emails you may have. We have great content on our website. We do blogs. And of course, any other webinars that interest you around public speaking, presentation skills, confidence, overcoming fear, writing a presentation, speaking off the cuff, dealing with hecklers in the audience. We can create a whole range of webinars for you. I record my webinars, so if you've missed out on any of this, send me an email and I will make the recording available to you. Bye for now.